So everybody wants a quad that flies like this. Or like this. Now the first step in getting your quad to actually fly that good is to make sure it has a clean build. Now YouTubers are always talking about how much better you can tune a quad when it's got a clean build. They never actually tell you what a clean build is. Now put away your soap and your scrub brush. A clean build does not refer to having to actually get all the dirt off of your quad, although that can help. But it means if it's mechanically sound, it doesn't have anything adding any unwanted movements or vibrations into the gyro data. Now these vibrations are not approved by Marky Mark, and will confuse the little CPU in your flight controller into thinking the quad's making movements it's not, and will try to react to those movements, and it can cause all kinds of crazy things to happen while you're flying. And if they are present and your quad is doing that, it kind of makes it pointless to do any kind of further tuning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my top 5 tips on how to make your build clean. Number 1 is that all your screws are tight and all your solder connections are good. Now this one seems pretty obvious, but there's a phrase I've coined over the years with teaching people how to fly FPV, and that's that new builds lose screws. And I find this particularly important with newer builds, especially after the first like 2 or 3 flights. Mostly your motor screws tend to come loose, arm screws tend to come loose, and all of those things can actually add vibrations if your motors can move a little bit apart from the carbon, or if the arms can move apart from the rest of the frame. It's all just going to add more vibrations and build up. As far as soldering, this isn't really a video where I'm going to go into depth about all the techniques of soldering, but the number 1 tip is to get a good soldering iron. I've got the Pine Sill V2, I believe. And this one's really nice because you can bring it with you wherever you go and power it off of USB-C or off of a barrel connection. And if you have one of these, you can actually run it off of your flight packs. Now loose screws will actually make your carbon vibrate against each other more than your favorite Hitachi product, and it'll cause those vibrations to get into your flight controller, which your flight controller will either have to work harder to filter out or will sneak past your filters and cause terrible flight performance. And when checking your screws, I do recommend also grabbing your arms like this, 2 of them that are across from each other, and just trying to move them back and forth. If you feel any movement, one of your arm screws is loose, then you rotate the quad, try it again, rotate, try it again, and then check the last one. And if all those are good, you should have a tight flying quad. Now the second most important thing to a clean build is having a golden nut on your stack screws. Now while this sounds like a weird, dirty euphemism, it's actually something coined by Chris Rosser, and it's basically talking about having your stack screws is going to be screw, carbon, and then a nut on top that stop that screw from moving. Now, a lot of new builders will actually forget to put that nut on there or just disregard it. And that actually causes a lot of issues with unwanted yaw noise because your flight controller can still rotate on its own after you stop. So you like stop a move and then the flight controller will continue moving. It'll cause all kinds of horrible problems that's hard to tune out. Now, one of the difficulties of figuring out if this is your problem or not is if you fly slow and smooth, like doing a lot of cinematic stuff, you probably won't even notice any weird movements. But as soon as you do any kind of snap rolls or snap anything, that's when it's going to show up. So number 3 on the list is having anything loose on your build. And that can be anything from antennas that are floppy that move around a lot to your pigtail coming down, anything that can move on its own independent of the frame moving. I do recommend looking up your flight controller online, finding a picture of it that shows all the different ICs on it, identifying which one is the gyro, and running your wires away from that. Now, if you do have any issues with this, it is one that's actually fairly easy to fix. You can usually just snip wires shorter, solder them shorter, zip tie things away onto either posts or just bundle them up and zip tie them together. Use VHB to like shrink wrap some wires, stick it to a frame somewhere. Now, tying everything down that can move on your quad also helps with durability because then nothing can actually snag onto twigs or branches. I do recommend taping down motor wires or using race wire like this, where it's stuck to the arm so it can't go anywhere. Okay, the number 4th issue is going to be frame issues. Now this can be anything from plate on your carbon being cracked or broken, or it can be an issue with your arms or carbon delaminating to the point where it gets floppy. These ones are still fine though, they're actually pretty stiff. I've had ones where the arm isn't actually milled the right thickness, and the center locking plate was thicker, and that meant you could never actually tighten the arm down fully, so it was always vibrating, and it was really weird because it would always happen at different RPMs, or it would come loose at different times. It would fly 3 packs fine, and the next 5 packs it would vibrate like crazy. That one took me 6 months to figure out. So if you're not flying a bigger propped quad that's open and you're flying a whoop, frame issues can just be as simple as just having a cracked duct that vibrates apart, or your battery being loose and flopping around. Okay, and the last issue is having either bent motors or bent, damaged, cracked props. Now this one is not something that usually you're going to see on a new build, but after you crash it a few times, you can bend the motors. Bending a motor shaft so that it like wobbles when it turns definitely causes vibrations. Having like a prop bent or cracked can cause all kinds of weirdness as it cuts through the air, causing the quad to move around. Not really a whole lot of tips on how to deal with that other than replacing the part that's bad. But one thing you can do on motors, if you suspect one's bent, you can spin it around and kind of watch the bell. And if it is bent, it'll usually raise and lower as it turns. And that's the easiest way to troubleshoot that. The other thing you can do is if you're put your quad into turtle mode, put it down and then like right side up, and then slowly spin each motor. Usually you'll see if one of them's bad, you'll see the camera start to vibrate with only one of the motors. And that can kind of help you determine which one's bad. Once you check those 5 things, you know your build is clean and you're ready to either load a preset that requires a clean tune or start tuning from scratch, and you can actually push it as far as your hardware allows. And if that's something you're into, stay tuned, because I'm going to walk you through how I tune a quad. Usually it takes me a couple packs, and that gets me about 80% of the way there. And then there's actually a new tool that I'll tell you about that helps you get your tune all the way from that 80% to 100.